we're going to hear today to have a family and parent webinar, which is very exciting for us. This is the first time we're doing it. And I am joined by...
Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Russell. I am the Assistant Dean of Students here at UVM. It's good to be here, and welcome.
And I'm Annie Stevens, the Vice Provost for Student Affairs here at the university. It is a beautiful fall, sunny day, and I'm really excited that you can join us. So a little bit about today, we're going to walk through the first 6 weeks and what happens during the first 6 weeks, especially those of you who might be parents or family members of first-year students. But we'll also talk about what happens next in the next few set of weeks, particularly right up till Thanksgiving, and then talk about all 4 years a little bit and give you a sense of like what happens at UVM, and have you be able to kind of chime in if you want. We've already collected questions ahead of time, so we'll try to get through some of those. But feel free to chime in if you can. Know that whatever you say when you write in is not anonymous. So don't talk about your student or their room number or anything like that, and because you're just really going to out them right in front of the webinar. But we'll get started. We're going to flip through a lot of slides, so you won't see us in a minute, but we'll still be here and talk you through the slides that we've prepared today. So again, welcome, and I think we'll just get started on our first slide. Thanks. So today's goals, as I've already shared, we're a little bit about the first 6 weeks, planning the next 6 weeks, and offer actually throughout this a conversation topic for you, perhaps, just so you can feel prepared of what to ask your student along the way. And we know in that first 6 weeks particularly that there's key elements for a student's skill set to be most successful. And those elements, you can range them in the academic areas, in the social skill areas, in the sense of maturity. And those of you who joined us at orientation in June have already seen some of this. So it's kind of how we think about making sure students are successful. So the managing of time, that could happen not only in the first 6 weeks and trying to really get used to that transition between high school and college, but it's also a lot around managing time, any transition period, right? And what happens as in your sophomore year, as the schedules change, even next semester as the schedule changes. Those are all things that could be bumps in the road for students. So that's a key thing that we try to work with students on, and be great for you to talk to your student about those same things. Getting involved, that is absolutely key. That will help build social skills. As a matter of fact, some of you wrote in, like, if they're not finding friends already, is that a problem? No, it's not a problem. That's pretty normal. And it's okay if they're not finding friends away, but you do want to encourage involvement. And we have lots of ways to get involved on campus, and clubs and organizations, even going to tutoring, right? And kind of meeting other students in classes, going to tutoring sessions together. Any of those things can help them make new connections and new friendships. And then, of course, just changing social groups. That happens more along the way. The roommate doesn't have to be the best friend. They're going to find different social groups in classes, in residence halls, in clubs. And so actually a good skill set is to know how to navigate in and out of those kinds of connections. And then, of course, making good choices. That goes along with a sense of maturity. And, we strive for students to be really healthy, engaged and successful here, and making good decisions for themselves is all about that. And it comes down to basic life skills, right? It's everything from doing laundry to prepping for class and knowing how to get there on their own and on time, and engaging with professors, and meeting with professors during their office hours. These are all key things that I hope that you feel comfortable asking and having conversations with your student about that. So if we look at the first 6 weeks, and let's take that just a snapshot year to year, and Joe, feel free to chime in too, but that first year, it is a lot about living away from home, right? I mean, that's pretty typical. That's to be expected. roller coaster will happen. Some might be experiencing what I call the honeymoon phase. And there, everything is great. Everything couldn't be better. They have already met best friends and they're in love with all their classes. Some might be really homesick and struggling to find friends and feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to make it. And we know that if they just can hang in there, feel like they just slow down a little bit, take their time, not kind of beat themselves up about finding friends or not feeling good about themselves, that they will be able to make it. And there's lots of supportive resources on campus to do that. There are advisors, there are residence hall staff, certainly there's counseling services available. All those things help students who are having if we go to the second year, then we certainly, I think probably out of this list, I would highlight most the choosing of a major. Like that is key in the second year, and making sure that they have an advisor, and yes, they can change their advisor if they don't feel like they connect with their academic advisor right now. And so you want to really start conversations about in their second year about choosing a major. What are they interested in? Where do they feel like their passion lies, and what they love, which classes are they loving? And they should follow that. That's good instinct to follow kind of what they love. I remember I thought I was going to be an environmental major, and I turned out loving every single political science class I had. And so I changed my major. Matter of fact, a lot of students change their major on average like 4 or 5, even 6 times before they actually declare one. So don't worry if your student is having kind of the ups and downs of not being able to decide quite quickly what their major is. And then that third year, I want to highlight moving off campus. I think that's probably one of the biggest transitions at UVM. While your student can stay on campus and live in the residence halls all 4 years if they want, they really typically move off campus. And I think a lot of our students just want to find that sense of independence in doing that. And there's apartments available in the nearby downtown area. But moving off campus also comes with a lot of adult decisions about signing leases, managing their own money, cooking for themselves. So those are the kinds of things that you'll want to start to think about in their third year. I do really hope for them that they also think about studying abroad. We know that studying abroad, along with internships or undergraduate research, these are the things that really can highlight a college career. And many students think they can't afford it, and yet there are ways to study abroad that become very affordable. So I would encourage folks, and I hope you encourage your student to reach out to our Office of International Education about studying abroad and what that experience is like for them. And then in their senior year, because they all will graduate in 4 years, in our senior year, we really are hoping that they're looking at, of course, now leadership opportunities. They better have already started to think about a career, or education, post-college education into grad school or law school or med school. But those are the things we want them to be thinking about. And what does that mean? But they should also think about the career piece early on. And we actually have a 4-year plan for career success through our Career Center. And it is a great plan that students can follow in order to stay on track, if you will, to make sure that they're lined up. By the time they get to their senior year, they've lined up pretty well. All of the different classes, as well as outside of the classroom experiences that put them really at the top of their game in terms of finding employment or going on to grad school. I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
Hey, Annie, I was just going to jump in and suggest, before we move off of this slide, you just know that we've gotten a couple of the questions that were submitted ahead of time that talked about this phenomenon that we know about called the sophomore slump. And we may have some sophomore parents or families out there listening, wondered if you had any thoughts about what are some of the signs or symptoms of that, or any advice or thoughts about how we can advise or encourage our sophomores to stay engaged through that year?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And, I do believe the sophomore slump can be very real for some students. And, the reason that happens is because no matter UVM or any college campus, it's not new anymore. That first year is done. They've kind of gotten through all the challenges, and as much as those challenges happen, they're also exciting, right? They're kind of fun to get through those first few challenges and know that they can do college on their own. But then that second year comes along and there's nothing new so much. I mean, they have a similar routine. They know the campus. They kind of already have a slight friendship group that they probably feel comfortable with. So that slump, I think, comes in the fact that it feels a little more boring in some ways. So this is a good time for them to kind of get out of their comfort zone and start to spread their wings a little bit more and challenge themselves. It also, though, could be because they are feeling more pressure about choosing a major. Like I said, that for some can feel really like a lot of pressure. And so making sure that they're connecting with their academic advisors, I think, is a really good time. And making sure they feel connected to someone who is an advisor during their sophomore year is really important, because that person can help them get through some of that slump. And getting more involved is always a good thing. Is that kind of what you were aiming at, Joe? It
is. I think that's super helpful. I can talk a little bit about the things that I sometimes see in working with students, and it really is starting to get to those bigger questions of purpose and meaning and connection on campus. So I think I've seen students who both have chosen a major already kind of start to ask that big question of, what does that really mean? Is this the right major? Is this something I'm passionate about and want to continue doing? And for folks who are in that process of choosing a major, as you said, it's stressful. There's a little bit of anxiety there. So the advice that we give is always connecting with folks about that is the really appropriate, helpful thing. Advisors, even non-advisor faculty members, folks in a student services office within their dean, the college dean's office. Any points of contact that folks can start to ask the questions, like, what am I really excited about? What gives me meaning or purpose on campus, can really turn that sophomore year around and help propel them through the third and fourth years.
Mm-hmm. No, totally agree, Joe. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the residential experience as well?
Absolutely. We're kind of looking and reviewing some of the online questions. One of the questions that you all have seen here is talking about planning for off-campus housing in sophomore year can be super difficult, and we hear that as well. We know that many students are already trying to find out who am I going to live with, where am I going to live, what does off-campus housing look like. I'm going to encourage you all, if you have a sophomore out there who's thinking about moving off campus for junior year, to look out for things like off-campus housing seminars and workshops that are put on by the Office of Student Community Relations here on campus. We've heard from students that that's probably one of the most tangible things that students who are looking to move off campus can do to start to understand the process and start to feel a little bit less stressed out. It helps empower them to know what are the things to look for when signing the lease. How do they navigate that process, knowing that it's a legally binding document? Really tapping into that resource is a really helpful thing to do. We also have a couple other things that we know help. We're just to help put it out there, since I mentioned it, the next off-campus housing workshop is going to be on October 4th at 5 p.m. So that's coming up next week. If you have a sophomore, encourage them to attend. We also know there are a couple other options that are kind of hybrid. One of them is we've turned one of our residence halls on campus into a community that's meant to really be this transitional housing experience for folks prior to moving into an off-campus apartment or house downtown. A community that is at the edge of campus, really meant to help inculcate and develop independence. We call it the journey to independence, and we really hope that it actually does become for students a journey to independence. So that's something, again, for students to look into if they're not kind of feeling like they have friends that they want to be roommates with or have found a place that they're interested in, to think about looking and asking Res Life about the journey to independence.
And that's located in Gene Mance Residence Hall, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And if it's helpful to hear, Gene Mance has gone through a little bit of a recent renovation. Both UVM Dine-In and Res Life spent a bunch of money just to make that space feel a little bit more cozy and comfortable, and provide some food options within the building. That was probably one of the major complaints that folks got about Gene Mann's, was it's so far from anywhere to eat. And so there's now a little cafe that students can get a little bite to eat right there in that building, that I've heard is already kind of a pretty positive thing.
The location itself, though, is perfect. You know, you're close to downtown, and yet you're still right on the edge of campus and can get to class pretty quickly. What else about Res Life?
Indeed. So we're just to help frame folks, we decided that we were going to try and highlight a couple hot topics. Certainly these have come up in the questions that were asked ahead of the webinar. We also know that these are some of the phone calls that we've been getting in the office, and some of the traffic on the parent Facebook group. Certainly the first one we're going to talk about is Res Life. So some announcements and or reminders and or encouragements. Res Life recently went through the process of asking all roommates on campus to complete what's called a roommate agreement. For the first time ever, the numbers of students who have completed those agreements are up in the 80% range. I think the number they last heard was 83% of students on campus have completed a roommate agreement. I encourage you to talk to your student, if they live on campus, about whether they've done this or not. And maybe even a little bit deeper dive might be to ask, was it helpful? Was that process a helpful process? Was your student able to actually advocate for their needs and compromise and work with their roommate or roommates to come to what feels like a really positive and agreeable place? And if the answer is no, then that's a great thing that they can reconnect with their RA and ask for some support and help in possibly, it may not be as formal as a mediation, but just to get some help in having that conversation. Someone else that might have some ideas about how to have a balanced conversation so that everyone in the room can feel like they can sleep, study, and be healthy. So that's a really important thing. Here at the bottom of the screen, you're going to notice we have a few of these throughout the presentation, that it might be, if you've not asked that specific question, feel free to ask your student that specific question next time you talk with them. Just kind of say, I heard some inside information. I heard these things called roommate agreements. Have you done that, and how did that go? Also want to remind folks that in Res Life, there are a number of full-time and part-time staff available to support students. The thing that makes me the saddest is when I hear from students or sometimes their families, and they have no idea who to turn to for support when they're going through a hard time, or who to ask a question when they have a question. I'm going to put out there that the first local resource for students who live in the residence halls are their hall staff. So an RA is an undergrad student that lives on your student's floor or within the community. And that comes with pros and cons. You know, we know that being an undergrad student is a really helpful thing for other students to hear about what the experience at UVM is like. But I will also just say out there to parents and families, they are undergrad students with their own full course load. And so I encourage folks to not assume or think that RAs are going to be able to do it all or solve all the problems. Full-time hall staff exists. They're folks who live and work in the building. They are called area coordinators or assistant residence directors. Encourage your students to connect with those folks. Just a big announcement around housing process for folks who are planning to come back to campus. So those are current first-year students planning to live on campus for next year, or upper-level students who want to come back. Just released on UVM's Res Life website is a whole bunch of information about that housing process. So anyone who is choosing to return to campus, they've issued dates for when to sign housing contracts, when to identify what learning community you want to be a part of, and what that will look like. Most of those are coming up starting early in January. So please look at those yourselves on the Res Life website and encourage your students to do so.
And those are absolutely key dates to know. I agree with Joe to have those dates known, and you can look those up on the website, because, you know, for current first year students, they're required to come back the next 2 years. There's a 4-semester requirement to live on campus. So it's really our sophomore students who have the choice of whether they want to live downtown or stay on campus. So those are good dates to know and to keep in mind. And the guide app will also really be helpful. So many of our students have already downloaded a guide app for UVM, and all of that can be on that app and all other kinds of resources as well. So that's another great question you could perhaps ask your student if they've got that app to look it up, and if they know what the housing process looks like for them next year, because they'll want to start to make some decisions about that and talk to students and friends about being roommates. Joe, do you want to cover the student health pieces?
The next hot topic we're going to go through very quickly is just about health. We've seen a number of questions that cover all of these: physical health, mental health, and substance use. So just to remind folks, information about physical health services and resources on campus are available on the Center for Health and Wellbeing's website. If you just search for student health services, it'll give you all the information that your student might need. For example, hours of operation. We know that the center is open 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday, and on Saturdays 9 to 1 p.m. mainly for urgent care issues. But if your student ever experiences some kind of physical health concern, injury or illness or sickness, they can call into and there's an on-call service number available on that website. It's 1-866-878-2485. And speak to a triage nurse that will help determine, should they wait till Monday to come in for an appointment? Should they go to an urgent care clinic off campus? Should they go to the emergency department? They can help triage that over the phone. So my encouragement is always to be looking online. When they can go there in person, they should do that. And if it's closed, to call and find out what to do. A reminder that we have a number of mental health services as well that students can be calling to make appointments. We do know that not uncommon for any college campus is that right now for new appointments at our counseling center, there's a little bit of a wait, but I always encourage students to call, make an appointment, and then start to put some things in place between when they call and that appointment. Sometimes going to the Living Well office in the Davis Center is a really great point of support that helps get them through until their appointment with a therapist or counselor can happen. Last thing, we're just going to remind parents that if any of our students who are under 21 are found responsible for violating UVM's substance use, alcohol, cannabis, or other drug policies, we're going to send a letter home so that you know that. And we do that to partner with you. Our hope is that if you ever got one of those letters, that you would then engage in helpful conversation with your student about the fact that substance use on a college campus can sometimes be one of the things that derails a student's ability to be successful. And so helping them think through making wise choices really is helpful, that you partner with us in the work that we do. Some of that partnership has led to, we've seen over the past several years, a 33% decline in high-risk drinking numbers, which is huge, and we're excited about that. And we hope that only continues to decline.
Yeah, I would add there too, Joe, while we see that decline for high-risk drinking, we're also always concerned about cannabis use because, our legislation just passed legalization of cannabis. And I always have a fear that our students walk around and think it's okay, and some even have a misperception that cannabis use can be healthy. And while that might be true in some aspects and very, small instances, for students who are of a typical college age, 18 to 24, cannabis use really can impact their brain development. And so right at a time in those 4 years when we want them to be at their optimum, and at their best for learning, cannabis use is probably the one major issue that gets in their way around that. It's been shown to cause memory loss, motivational issues, motivation declines, and it really has an impact on their learning in lots of ways. So if there are families and parents out there and you feel like maybe your student is choosing to use cannabis, and again, as Joe said, that's against university policy, even though it is legal in the state if you're 21. If they're choosing to do that, I would really have a great conversation with them about the health impact and about what it means to do that while in college when they're really trying to get the most out of these 4 years that they're here. So without being too preachy about that, I just always worry about our students and want them to be at the best they can be. You know, Joe, the other piece I want to kind of chime in about health that you've seen and I've seen lately on campus is we've had already, unfortunately, a couple of literally run-ins on campus, meaning skateboards, bikes, pedestrians, you know, our shuttle buses are all moving in and out campus, in and around campus. And in these first 6 weeks, as folks don't really know the campus well, you know, and people are new to the area, some of our students, I see them, you know, out there on their skateboards and bikes, riding without helmets, going really quickly. And that scares me. I mean, it really is something that I think we need to do a better job as a university, not only communicating about what that looks like, but I'm hoping our families and parents can help us encourage students. If they have, you know, bought them bikes, it's not only just about how to keep their bike safe or their skateboard safe, but it's also about, you know, how the rules of the road, right? It's how to ride around safely and skateboard around safely without, goodness, they don't want to clip off their new professor that they have in a classroom. So just a few tips about what it's like to be on campus right now and what we're seeing. So with that, let's move ahead to the next 6 weeks. You know, I think next week, if I have the calendar right, next week is the last week of that first 6 weeks of time on campus. And so, you know, this is the longest haul. I like to think of it like that. These next 6 weeks are really the time between now and Thanksgiving. And so you can imagine this is a really long period for students, especially new students. They will have a break coming up in October, one day break from classes, but generally it's kind of a long haul, and it gets darker, it gets colder, and midterms are coming up. And so we like to talk about these next 6 weeks because it is the longest stretch, and patterns start to emerge now, right? So the patterns around communicating, even communicating with parents and families, like, have you had a conversation about how often do you want to hear from your student, or you're not hearing enough, or you're not hearing about how their academics are going for them. Like, these are good conversations to have because midterms are right around the corner. And I know that students kind of get freaked out. They start getting stressed about the midterms, as well they should be. It's okay to be stressed, not just, you know, college is hard. It's supposed to be. But it's good to start to think about encouraging patterns that are positive and healthy, right? That they're getting enough sleep, they're studying, they have good study habits, they're studying a lot. And, you know, there could be some challenging courses out there, and I hope they are. And they really need to make sure that they're spending the time and balancing their time well, along with, you know, finding friends and doing those social things. So it's a good time right now to really be talking to your student. I hope some of you will be coming up next weekend for family weekend. And if you're not, I really would encourage you to reach out right around now, since midterms are hitting and things start to really set into a pattern for the students. So it's just a good tip that we like to share before Thanksgiving break kind of comes along. So, and the other piece I want to mention there that I think some parents and families don't know is we do some faculty will send out what we call academic alerts, meaning if they haven't seen students in classes regularly, or they feel like, oh, those first couple of tests or papers aren't going well, the students will get an academic alert from most faculty. Not all use the system, but most faculty will. And that's a good question too about, you know, how have you been doing? Have you gotten any academic alerts from your professors? Because that is a good check-in. You don't want to go all semester without knowing how you're doing in class, and connecting with faculty members outside the classroom or during office hours about how they're doing. You know, when we think about all of that surrounds midterms and all of the stuff around stress, around academics, because this is really when it starts to kind of kick in big. Please, I hope you really are encouraging students to use tutoring services. They are fabulous. It's located in the Living Learning Center. There's peer tutoring. And these students really want to look out for each other. And that's what I love about UVM students, because they're just there to help each other. They're students who've already been through some of these hard courses and know the ropes, know the professors, know what they like to see on tests or papers. And it's great. We also have a writing center over in the library that can help students with papers as well. So it's just another great resource we have at UVM. You know, as we turn kind of, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're talking about Thanksgiving. We haven't even gotten to Halloween yet, which Halloween is also another time to talk about being safe. But, you know, you talk about Thanksgiving is around the corner, really, and it's great. They'll have a good break. They'll have time, hopefully, to go home or somewhere else and just kind of get a break from campus and classes. You know, and many students, though, here's a couple of things to think about Thanksgiving. One, especially the first year students, you know, they're coming home for the first time, and now, you know, they think they're Joe adult. No offense, Joe.
None taken.
But they're like Joe and Sally adult, like, and they know the ropes, and they're going to walk in, and they're not going to want a curfew. They're going to want to go out and see all their high school friends again and connect and do all these things. And you're going to have a conversation about what does it mean now for them to be another adult in the house, and what are your expectations of them, and what are their expectations of you, and how to figure all of that out. And those are good conversations to have before they get home for the break, right? And kind of walking through what that's going to look like. And also know, you know, finals are right around the corner after Thanksgiving break. So they'll have this break, and it's a good week here at UVM. And so finals, when they get back, are almost immediate. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's some students, and many students, who will actually need to come home for Thanksgiving. And while they want to kind of like probably veg out and watch Netflix, that's not what they're going to be able to do. They're going to have to really write papers, finish up projects, and probably crack open those books for quite a bit to make sure that they come into finals really strong and kind of hit their stride, especially those first year students who haven't been through finals yet on campus. They'll want to make sure they use Thanksgiving in a really good way. And then there's a conversation about winter break and next semester and what those opportunities look like. Winter break is really long. It's about a month. So what's that going to mean for them? How are they going to spend their time? Might they get a job? Just anything to stay involved and stay busy over winter break would be helpful. So as we move on, I think it's really good to think about the next 6 weeks. And Joe, I'll hand those over to you to walk through.
So again, a part of why we're having this conversation right now is that we are in the middle of, we're about to complete 6 weeks of school. And then from there, 6 weeks after that gets us right there to Thanksgiving break. So we start to see some transitions happen. For first year students, oh my gosh, midterms. It's the first set of major assignments. We also see students starting to pick, choose, and refuse and commit to certain clubs. What started off as, I've put my name on 10 different email listservs for clubs, now turns into, oh, I'm actually going to be showing up to this club or that club. I'll also make a note for folks who have students who are involved in things like the outing club, the ski and snowboard club. Those are pretty big organizations. And I've heard some students who have felt like, well, how do I make friends in those big organizations? And the answer is you actually have to kind of sign up for and show up to activities when you're able to, and or look for some other opportunities that have smaller, more intimate, more regular meetings that might facilitate those connections. Folks will start to think about, from now into November, what classes am I going to take in the spring? I'm going to be meeting with my advisor, talking with faculty, and starting to select courses that will eventually happen in November. It's getting colder, and folks are going home. We've talked about that. We've talked about declaring or changing a major for sophomores. We've talked about thinking about roommates and signing a lease. This really then starts to go from a theoretical conversation into actually signing leases and doing things concretely. We're going to highlight here thinking about emerging leadership in clubs and teams as sophomores. And so just encourage your student, if they've been doing something, they did it for their first year, they're now in their second year, have they expressed interest in leadership or doing something more active than just being a member at a club. For our third years, again, we start to gear up for, they will start to know if they've been accepted into study abroad, and they're starting to now plan for departure in spring semester. Of course, folks who have moved off campus, the reality of living off campus also starts to set in. What does it mean that my landlord might not be as communicative as Res Life used to be when I submitted a fix-it? How do I navigate that? How do I find some resources around that? And we encourage folks, again, to connect with the Office of Student Community Relations if they're experiencing any struggles or difficulties. Starting to feel like a UVM Pro is also a wonderful thing. Now our third-year students and our seniors all of a sudden really start to feel like this place is mine, and it's wonderful. For our seniors, really, again, we're wrapping up. Degree audits start to happen. People are really now starting to focus on, I have a concrete sense of when my academics are going to be finishing, and answering the question, what comes next? Is it a job? Is it grad school? Have I connected with the Career Center? Am I doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing to make that happen? I want to highlight one big thing that's coming up, folks, is October 3rd, the Career Center is sponsoring a career fair on campus. So shameless plug, encourage your students to attend. It's a wonderful opportunity. Regardless of what year you are, it is a helpful thing for students to attend this career fair. Not just for seniors, not just for people needing an internship between junior and senior year. This is everyone. And so encourage your students to really look into that as a wonderful opportunity to start to do the work to prep for career. And the last thing I'm going to highlight, sorry, reading my notes here, I forgot to mention that there is also going to be a majors fair on October 31st. So for students who are still selecting a major or thinking about changing a major, majors fair is a wonderful opportunity coming up on October 31st as they head into picking classes in November. We're going to move ahead to talk about some resources. We know that there are some bumps in the road that will happen, but a couple big resources and thoughts we wanted to share with you. Since I'm talking, I'm going to pick the bottom picture on this slide and just say that if your student has not yet downloaded the Guide app, please encourage them to do that. Ask the question, do you have the Guide app on your phone? And if they look at you with like big eyes and have no idea what you're talking about, please say, I know that UVM is expecting all students to download and utilize the Guide app. It really is a place that we push lots of notifications to, reminders, events, important things that they need to do as a student show up on that platform. So please encourage it. The more you can help us with that is the better I think students will be. Annie, I'm going to let you talk about four-year plan for career success.
Yeah, well, we did this a little bit early on in the webinar, but I mentioned the 4-year plan for career success, which I just think is a really nice way to outline for students in their 4 years, those things, much like this webinar, actually, those things that should or they could be thinking about or doing in each of the 4 years to really plan out, if you will, what opportunities come next and what's some good timing for each year that sets them up for success by the time that they graduate. So again, if folks log on to the Career Center website, it's pretty easy to find there in terms of the 4-year plan for career success. And again, it's not just setting them up for career success, it really is setting them up for post-graduation, future education, and just life in general about some great skills that they get while they're here. We know from our own research that the more the students are involved in certain activities, and especially if they take on leadership opportunities, they develop amazing skills along the way, like conflict management, leading meetings, figuring out how to navigate strong issues and problem solve. So there's some really good, and we know actually that from our employers out there that we talk to and that the Career Center staff talk to, while it's really great to focus in on a discipline and become very knowledgeable at discipline, they're also looking for a wide breadth of skills that students come out of college with beyond just knowing chemistry. They want to know that you can work with others well. They want to know that you have some skill and depth in terms of multicultural competence and working with others who are different from yourself. So those are all the kinds of things that we lay out for students about that are in the 4-year plan for career success. And the next, which I love this slide, this is one of my favorite slides, about just thinking about not only our students being able to, be here and just make it through college. We don't want them to just make it and survive. We want them to flourish. So this is Professor Keyes. He's great in terms of thinking about students' mental health particularly, but just generally in college overall. These are the things, that really are important to students. And I think wanting to make sure they're balancing out all of these different, opportunities in their life. And we know any kind of balance of all of these things will create a student who is flourishing, who just loves it here at UVM. And it's so happy and so enriching and fulfilling for me to talk to students every day that really are making the most out of college and what it means to be here at UVM. So talk about, helpful kind of conversations to have with students about how they're balancing each of these, and are they mentoring, and how are they having positive interactions with faculty and staff and students? Are they learning what they want to be learning and trying some new classes, or trying to, we hold like cooking classes over in Central Campus Residence Hall. Are they just trying something new and kind of broadening their thoughts about what it means to be in college? And now is a good time, as many of us know, to take those kinds of risks and learn new things. I think if I look at this slide, exercise is probably the only thing I think you probably can do too much of. And I probably shouldn't be one to talk about that, but because I don't do enough of it. But exercise, I do know students who could over-exercise, and we certainly don't want that to happen either. So those are just some nice ways to think about how to flourish in college campuses. But I think, Joe, you're going to talk about more resources that we have as we get to kind of the end of this webinar, and what we hope families and parents can look to beyond this webinar for helpful resources.
Yep, indeed. And we are coming to the end here. Our hope is to end in a few moments, and then we'll leave us some time to get to some of the questions that you asked either before, or some of the live questions that might be coming in through the chat. I do want to make a shameless plug for some of the website resources that we have on campus. Certainly, there's a resource section for families on the Vice Provost, Dean of Students website. And I will say that the folks who curate that website do a great job of keeping it current. It's not just a static website that has some old, boring information, I think, in my opinion. I think the website really is a wonderful place to get some current information about things going on campus and how to help support your students. So check out that family resource page on the Vice Provost Dean of Students website. I know that also many folks are involved or a part of the parent and family Facebook discussion group. It's a wonderful resource to not just talk with each other, but again, get some real helpful recommendations, suggestions, and answers to questions. One resource that you may not be as familiar with, I'm just going to point out there, especially for incoming new families, is a website, a program out of the JED Foundation called Set to Go. And if you just searched for Set to Go on the JED Foundation's website, it has some information for students, families, and for us as institutions about how can we help that transition to college be as successful as we can, especially as it relates to mental health and emotional readiness. So just some things for you to look out on your own. To wrap up, or as we get towards wrapping up, we're going to talk about times that we communicate with you about your student and encourage you to communicate with us. So we do send out regular communications through email and monthly newsletters. We certainly send those notifications of policy violations when students are found responsible. And then, of course, if there is something major that happens, we know that a student might be in the hospital for some reason, or there has been an incident that happens on campus that's a pretty major incident. Our desire always is to engage families in conversation, both to keep you informed when we're able, and also then to partner with you about how we can support your students. So we do our best to communicate with you in those times. And then certainly please know that the door and the phone lines are always open for you to be in touch with us. There's really no barrier for you to be able to call us. So anytime you have an issue or question, certainly if your student is in a place of crisis or distress, you can pick up the phone, call us, or you can go online and submit a care form. If you just search for the words care form on the UVM website, is a report-in form that comes into the Dean of Students office so that we can reach out and support your student.
And Joe, I think it might be helpful just to kind of say what our number is in our office, which is 802-656-3380. And you can get any one of us at that number. You're probably more available than most of us. And so you'd be the best contact if there are parents or families who want to chat about their student. You know, as we wrap up here, we just want to offer 2 more points of contact with us over the next few weeks. One, I already mentioned next weekend. I'm really looking forward to seeing folks who are able to make it to come up to campus, and it will probably look just like that. In the picture, the leaves are already starting to turn a little bit up here, so it should be a great weekend for family and alumni weekend. I'll be hosting 2 events. One will be Friday night as parents and families check in. That'll be just a family social. And then Saturday morning is coffee and conversation with President Sullivan, and I'll also be there. And many members of our staff and student affairs will be there for folks who have questions or just want to learn more about their students and the resources we have. And of course, if this has gone well, and we hope it has, you know, we're going to try another opportunity at our next webinar. We'll have different members of our staff joining us, John Paul Grogan, who's the director of our counseling and psychiatry services, and Michelle Pavola, who is the doctor and lead director for our student health services. And those are just 2 fabulous resources on our campus talking about students' health overall and staying healthy while in college. So I think that really wraps up what we wanted to offer today. But if there's questions and conversation that we want to have online, Joe and I are certainly available to do that.
I am going to just kind of preface and start off by saying a number of folks submitted questions ahead of time before the webinar. And some of those questions were pretty specific. And we thought that what we're going to do is just reply to folks individually about some of those very specific questions. So know that we have received your questions, and we're going to do our best to address and get information or answers back to you. Some of the specific questions, we're going to start with maybe the things that we're seeing online. So going all the way back up to Carrie, your question about dates. I'm assuming that that's about returner room selection. And so again, as a reminder, students are going to be able to start signing housing contracts for returning to campus on January 4th. And that contract will be available until January 22nd. January 22nd is also our student accessibility services deadline around housing accommodations. You don't need to remember those. My encouragement is to go to the ResLife website, and you'll be able to click under current students. Under that tab will give you all the information about returning to campus. David, your question, yes, the answer is yes. A recording of this webinar is going to be available. We're going to send out information about how to access that after, so you can always rewatch and fast forward through the bits that were boring and get to the information that you found helpful, if that is the case. Helen, yes, the answer, whoops, we forgot to put women's hockey on that list. So yes, there's going to be a women's hockey 4 p.m. on Saturday of Parent Family Weekend. So go Cats go. I think it's going to be awesome. I encourage you all, as many of you are able to attend, to do so.
I'll probably be there. I love women's hockey. And Joe, I just got another question from Susan about semester abroad. And yeah, that is through our Office of International Education. Also a great thing to Google, just Google the office, and students can set up appointments with the study abroad advisors they have to talk about where they might go. I also know there's study abroad fairs that often happen, probably 1 or 2 a semester. So students can check those out as well. I'm sure they'll be posted on their websites. Any other questions coming in? I think we'll just check and see here as we go along. I think the one good thing to remember, as Joe and I are kind of just looking at notes and trying to finish up last questions or things to remember, is that you can always go to our uvm.edu /Dean of Students website, for family resources, and it kind of covers most of what we think and what we've heard over the years. You know, I've been here now 22 years. Joe has been here. Oh my gosh, Joe, how long have you been here at UVM?
Started working here back in 2005.
Wow. So, you know, we're pretty well versed at the questions that we get from parents and families. So we've tried to put as many resources up on our own Dean of Students website that we can, to make sure that you get what you need as parents and families to feel like you're comfortable and know the campus, even though that you might not be here with us physically. So
we're going to maybe try and tackle a couple of the questions that came in ahead of time. I think we've started on some of them. We've tried to fold in some of these answers throughout. A number of questions came in really around career readiness and what does my senior need to do? You know, one question, what's the best way to encourage your child to get started at the UVM Career Center ASAP? And I think the answer is you just encourage your student to get connected with the UVM Career Center. It's a hope and an expectation that our students will just go and make an appointment. If you want some insider language, you can ask your student whether or not they know what Handshake is. Handshake is this online platform that really is helping connect students with career resources. And that might be a nice tech savvy kind of young folk helpful way of connecting with that office is to ask them about, have they learned about what Handshake is and what to do with Handshake? Any of your thoughts about how to connect with the Career Center? No,
I think those are all really good. I know, you know, they're just located right down from the marketplace in the Davis Center. So a student really has no excuse for not knowing where the Career Center is, because if you're headed in the Davis Center on the second floor, it's just down the hallway, and there's this big yellow hand that stands out there to represent what you were talking about in terms of Handshake. So it's a great way to connect with the staff, and just walking in, I'm sure folks will be happy to see students anytime that they want to walk in and make an appointment. You know, I got a question here, Joe, from a parent who is talking about her son seems fine, except that he's lonely and spending way too much time alone in his room. And should she be worried? And, you know, I wouldn't worry too much, but I would try to make sure he gets out a little bit and tries to connect with an RA or somebody around that he can get out and enjoy at least something around the campus. Spending too much time in your room, you know, he's just not making the most of what UVM has to offer. So while I wouldn't be too worried about him, my only concern is that he's not taking advantage of the different resources that we have, or the different opportunities for him to really get the most out of college. So, and if the parent continues to worry about her son, again, I think, you know, she can call our office and we can talk about different ways and strategies to encourage her son to get out of his room and more involved, and to check in on him, make sure he's okay. So happy to do that with any parents who might be out there and kind of worried about that their son or daughter's not getting out of the room and involved enough, or not making the most of college. We have ways to kind of check in on them and strategize about how to do that best.
I'll give two very specific pieces of advice or encouragement around that. I often encourage students and their families in that specific circumstance to think about joining hall council. Any student who lives on campus, each residence hall on campus has a kind of governing body in the residence hall called their hall council. They do lots of social and educational programming. They do things for the community in their own building. And it's a really great kind of open resource for people to join. And you kind of get to meet some folks you might not have met otherwise. You don't have to go too far because it's right there in your residence hall. And it's a pretty great experience, in my opinion. The other thing, again, of course, is just to engage with clubs and organizations. So talk to your student about, have they gone onto links, and do they know the resources or the ways to look for a club or an organization that meets regularly that really might be a helpful place for them to meet some folks and make some friends. So those two things alone tend to be helpful. Again, as Annie said, if folks are trying to do things, and we hear this a lot, that folks are really trying to do, they're doing all the quote unquote right things, and are still just having trouble connecting with their people. Then again, be in touch with us. We're happy to have that conversation, happy to do some outreach. Sometimes it's also helpful for one of us on campus to be the one encouraging students to do these things, because it sounds different when it comes from me than when it comes from mom or dad or from someone from home. And we're happy to partner with you in that kind of conversation.
There's another one, I think a really good one too, that we think about in terms of transfer students. And we haven't talked about transfer students much. And that is an important population here, that, you know, students who are coming from other universities and for a variety of different reasons. But it's important, you know, it's an interesting piece because I think they struggle with similar 6 weeks issues that we just talked about. And yet they kind of sometimes don't reach out because they feel like they've already done it, been there, done that. And yet I would say if I were a parent or a family member of a transfer student, I would want them to be sure that they're doing some similar things that all new students, first-time students are doing, just to get the vibe of campus, to get out there, to, you know, explore what UVM has to offer, because the biggest fear I have for our transfer students is that they do feel like they've kind of all got it settled together, and yet it can be a very different campus. You know, I've worked at 5 other campuses during my career on university campuses, and they're all very unique. You know, they can be really different, and so transfer students shouldn't assume that they know all the different ways of getting involved and being successful while at UVM. You know, there's a little bit about dining. I think a couple of questions came in earlier about dining. We have a great dining program on campus, and yes, we try to do a lot of farm to table, you know, offerings in our dining halls. And yet I also know our students sometimes get kind of bored, you know, with the food. I often ask them, you know, when they tell me if they're bored with the food, I was like, well, pick your favorite restaurant and then go there every night of the week. So even your favorite restaurant is going to get a little boring over time. And that's why we have, I think it's now up to about 18 different places to eat on campus. So if students are feeling a little bored or want to kind of stretch out a little bit, you know, they should feel free to walk over to CCRH on main campus and have a meal there, or walk over to Redstone and eat at Simpson, where their meals are made to order right off an online platform, or go over to Harris Millis and sit and chat with folks who are eating at Harris Millis or the staff there. So there's a wide variety of places to eat on campus. There's some really fun hidden gems, like the Given Building has a great bistro that not many students know about. And Waterman Cafe in the Waterman Building is close to classes. Oh, and the one that people don't know about a lot is the Manor. So the very top floor of the Waterman Building, it's called the Manor, and they have seated wait service, or you can do a buffet, a salad bar, and students can be there. You often see many staff and faculty. I go there a lot, but it's fun, and not a lot of students know about the Manor, and it's a great, awesome view on a nice day. There's a patio that looks over the lake. So those are fun things to, I think about and suggest for students who want to have a different kind of meal or try some things out. We also have a nutritionist on campus through our dining program. So if students aren't feeling like they're getting the types of meals that they need to stay healthy, or they feel like they want to talk to somebody about the different options, like they're gluten-free or whatever that might look like for them, and because we know food is an individual thing, that I would suggest that they contact our nutritionist, and they work out of Robinson Hall on Redstone campus. Our UVM dining offices are there. So just a couple of helpful tips about dining on campus and what that looks like. I think the food here is fantastic, and I never get bored, and I'm a pretty picky eater. So I hope that helps some parents. Joe, do you want to?
I did have one more last. This is a fairly logistical, and it gets into the weeds, but I'm going to say it out loud. As you plan towards Thanksgiving break, for folks who live on campus, please know that the residence halls close for break for Thanksgiving week on Saturday, November 17th at noon. That's a pretty firm deadline, so please plan travel accordingly as you start to think towards now, if you haven't already done so, for Thanksgiving break. Then halls are closed and campus is pretty kind of on standby mode for that whole week. The residence halls will reopen on Sunday, the 25th. So Sunday after Thanksgiving at 8 a.m. for students to start to return back from break. So just plan ahead. It's helpful that folks know when those dates are if they are planning to travel home for Thanksgiving. If your student, for whatever reason, can't or is choosing to stay on campus, so we know that some students are international students, it's hard to go home for that week, or who live far away, California, Oregon, Florida, whatever it might be, that there are break housing options available on campus as well. And I'm going to encourage folks to look into those by mid-October, just to start to plan for on-campus break housing if the need arises. So I'm going to just say, thanks for everyone who tuned in to watch the webinar. We hope that it was helpful. We hope that it was part of an ongoing conversation. And if for whatever reason you need to, please feel free to be in touch with us after this. Annie? Yeah, no, I want to say the same thing. Joe, it's been great spending this time with you and with all the families and parents out there who've tuned in. I really hope that this has been helpful. It's great for us to feel like we stay in touch with you and really want to make sure we're answering your questions. And of course, we're partners here in making sure that your students are successful and that they feel UVM is the best choice they can make. So I'm wishing everybody a great rest of the day and wonderful weekend. And I think we'll sign off now. Thanks so much. Take care.